Welcome to Gemara Academy. In this class, we will present an overview of the Gemara and Tosfos in Masechta Shabbos on Daf Ches Amud Beis and Daf Tes Amud Aleph. Let's begin with a general outline of this class. So the Gemara discussed 4 different points in the last part of the Brisa that speaks about an eskufa, a doorstep. The last part of the Brisa that we brought down on Daf Vav Amud Aleph speaks about an eskufa, a doorstep, and our Gemara discusses this last part of the Brisa, and it focuses on 4 different points. And in this Gemara, there are 5 Tosfos. So let's see the Gemara now in the flowchart form. We'll begin with an overview of the Gemara, and then we'll move on to the Tosfos. So the first piece of Gemara addressed what it said in the Brisa, that a person is allowed to carry between the doorstep and the Rishus HaYachid, and he can carry between the doorstep and the Rishus HaRabim. And the Gemara asked, what is the status of this doorstep that such behavior is permitted? And we explained, it cannot be that it's a Rishus HaRabim, it cannot be that it's a Rishus HaYachid, and it cannot be a Karmelis. And the Gemara answered, it's referring to a doorstep which is a Makim P'tor. And we explained that that's possible in a case where the doorstep is less than 4 by 4 tefachim wide. The next piece of Gemara discussed what the Brisa said next, which is that although a person can carry between the doorstep and any Rishus, whether the Rishus HaYachid or the Rishus HaRabim, a person is not permitted to carry from the doorstep. He cannot use the doorstep to carry from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim, or from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid. And the Brisa concluded and said, and if the person did this, all 3 people involved are patur. And the Gemara said that it seems that this teaching contradicts the teaching from Rava. Because Rava said that when somebody carries through a makim p'tor, he is chayiv. And the Gemara answered that in the case of Rava, the item never came to rest in the makim p'tor, therefore he's chayiv. And in the case of the Brisa, it did come to rest in the makim p'tor, and therefore he is patur. The next piece of Gemara discussed the next din in the Brisa, which is a teaching by Acherim, referring to Rabbi Meir, that said that the skufa meshameshes shtei rishuyos, that the doorstep could serve as 2 different rishuyos. And he said if the door is open, then the doorstep is like the inside, it's Rishus HaYachid. And if the door is locked, then the doorstep is like the outside, it's like a Rishus HaRabim. And the Gemara asked, how can we say that when the door is open, the doorstep is like the inside, it's like a Rishus HaYachid, if we know that it requires another lechi, a post on the outside part of it, to treat it like a Rishus HaYachid? And the Gemara continued and said, this is true even if the doorstep is less than 4 by 4 tefachim wide. And the Gemara gave 2 answers. Rav Yehuda Amarav said that it's referring to the doorstep of a mavui, and this mavui has a kaira, a beam on top of it, and only on top of part of it, and it's on top of the inner side. And in that case, if the door is open, then the beam goes down and closes off, and that area now is a Rishus HaYachid under the doorstep, under the beam. And if the door is locked, then it no longer goes down because it's serving a very small area since it's blocked off from the mavui. And as a result, the area is going to be like the outside. And then we brought down the answer from Rav Ashi that it's referring to the doorstep of a house, and that the case is that there's a kaira, a beam, on the inner part of the doorstep and on the outer part of the doorstep, and the door locks in the middle. So when the door is open, the 2 beams combine to be one longer beam, which is 4 tefachim wide, and then it goes down and closes off. And if the door is locked, since it locks in between the 2 beams, as a result, they no longer are seen as connected, and since each beam is less than 4 tefachim wide, so it's not serving an area that will be a Rishus HaYachid, it doesn't go down and close off, and therefore under the outer beam is not a Rishus HaYachid. And the last part of the Gemara brought down the final teaching in the Brisa about a doorstep, which is again a teaching by Rabbi Meir and by Acherim, that if the doorstep is a Rishus HaYachid, then it's a Rishus La'atzma, it's a Rishus for itself, meaning that although it's a Rishus HaYachid and the inside is also Rishus HaYachid, a person's not allowed to carry from the inside to the doorstep or from the doorstep to the inside. And the Gemara said that this supports what Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi said, and then we brought down what Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi said. He said that Rabbi Meir said that if there were to be a post in the Rishus HaYachid, a person is not allowed to carry from the Rishus HaYachid to the post, and from the post to the Rishus HaYachid, even if this in the case when this post is the Rishus HaYachid itself, so it's 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim wide, a person is not allowed to carry between the Rishus HaYachid and the post. And he said the reason is Gzeira Mishum Tel Rishus HaRabim. It's a decree on account of a hill in Rishus HaRabim. We're concerned that if we permit a person to carry in such a manner in a Rishus HaYachid, he'll come to do the same thing when it's a Rishus HaRabim, where then it's Asr Min HaTorah. So that's an overview of the Gemara based on the way Rashi understands it. Now we're going to move on to present the Tosfos with an emphasis and focus to see how the point of Tosfos is to explain the Gemara. So the first Tosfos is on what we brought down, that the Brisa seems to be a contradiction on Rava. The Brisa is written by Tanoim. Rava is an Amir. It seems that the Brisa poses a difficulty on Rava, because the Brisa said that if a person carried from the Rishus HaYachid to the Rishus HaRabim, or from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid through the doorstep area, he is patur. And Rava said that if somebody carried an item 4 armas from Rishus HaRabim through a makim p'tur, he is chayiv. So it sounds like they're contradicting one another. So we hear Tosfos presents what Rashi holds is the case of Rava, that the person carried 4 Amos and Rosh Hashanah through a Mokim Ptur, and he asks 3 questions on him. He asks 3 questions on Rashi's explanation. And the second part of Tosfos is, Tosfos presents an alternative explanation and explains it. The alternative explanation of Tosfos is that it's a case where a person carried 4 Amos and Rosh Hashanah, but he was in Rosh Hashanah. And the thought was that when the object comes across the person's body, just like when it goes through the doorstep, it's considered at rest. So why don't we say he's potter? He carried 2 Amos, and then it came to rest, and then another 2 Amos, and it came to rest. For carrying 2 times 2 Amos of Rosh Hashanah, one is not chayiv, because he broke it down into 2 actions. It's not carrying 4 Amos at once. And the Gemara answered that when an object comes across a person, it's not considered at rest. Whereas when the person brought it into the doorstep, it is considered at rest, because now his hand entered the Rishus where his body is, where it wasn't previously when it was in the Rishus HaYachid, or when it was in the Rishus HaRabim. So that's the first Tosfos. So we see how Tosfos is coming to explain the Gemara to us, that we should understand what's the case of the Gemara. And he also posed some difficulties on Rashi, showing that that can't be the explanation according to him. The next Tosfos is on what we asked over here. How can we say when the door is open, the doorstep is like the inside, it should require another lechi on the outside part of it to be able to treat it like the inside, to be able to treat it like a Rishus HaYachid. So over here there's a Tosfos, and Tosfos presents that Rashi holds it's a case of a mavi and asks a question on him. Rashi says this is a case referring to the doorstep of a mavi. Tosfos asks a question on him, because later on the Gemara says it's la'olam ba'skufas bayis. In truth, it's talking about a house, which indicates that we were talking about a house also originally, and that's what the Gemara says. In truth, la'olam, it is by a house, meaning that also originally we were talking about a house. And Tosfos says it's referring to a mavoi, bias, or chatzar. It's referring to any one of those 3. It's not exclusive in the Havamina to a mavi. It's talking about any case. And the last part of Tosfos is Tosfos extensively explains his opinion that it's referring to a mavoi, bias, or chatzar. He addresses some questions on it, but that's the main part of Tosfos. So once again, we see how the purpose of Tosfos is to explain the Gemara to us. That when we're reading this case, what is this case referring to? Rashi says it's referring to the doorstep of a mavi, and Tosfos says that it's referring to the doorstep of a mavi, a bias, or a chatzar. The next Tosfos is also on this piece of Gemara, where the Gemara asked that how can you say when the door is open? It's like the inside, it's like a Rosh Hashanah, but we know it requires a lechi. And then the Gemara continued in its support and said, and even if it's less than 4 tefachim wide, referring to the doorstep, even if it's less than 4 tefachim wide, it still requires a lechi to treat it like a Rosh Hashanah. So over here, there's another Tosfos, where Tosfos asks why the Gemara didn't give a different answer. It seems like the Gemara could have given a very simple answer over here, where then the doorstep would be treated like a Rosh Hashanah. And Tosfos addresses a question on his answer. So Tosfos over here is explaining and supporting the Gemara. The Gemara asks a question, and Tosfos asks about this. Why did the Gemara just give a very simple answer? And he answers why not. And then he addresses a question on his answer. So once again, we see how Tosfos is coming to explain the Gemara to us. We look at the Gemara, and it would seem to us that there's a very simple answer here. Tosfos tells us why this wouldn't be a valid answer. The next Tosfos is on the answer of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, that it's referring to a doorstep that has, first of all, it's a doorstep of a mavi. Number 2, it's a doorstep that has a kaira on top of it. Number 3, the kaira is only on part of it. And number 4, it's only on the inner part of the doorstep. So it's the doorstep of a mavi, it has a kaira only on half, and it's on the inner half. And over here, Tosfos, number 1, explains why it has to be a mavi. The Gemara says it's referring to a mavi. Why could it only be a mavi? Tosfos explains to us that a kaira is only effective by a mavi. Number 2, Tosfos explains why it's only half roofed, and why only the inner side. Why is it a case that only half of the doorstep is roofed? Why not the whole thing? And if it has to be half, why specifically the inner half? And the third part of Tosfos is, aside from these 2 points, Tosfos explains that the kaira could have been placed differently, and still it would work the same way. So once again, we see how Tosfos is coming to explain the Gemara to us. The Gemara tells us what the case is. Tosfos explains to us why it has to be this case. Why a mavi? Why does it have to be half roofed? And why only the inner half? And Tosfos also explains to us that based on this understanding, we could see that the kaira could have just as well have been placed at a different location, and it would work just as effectively, which is basically, if it's placed anywhere, as long as there won't be from its outer edge to the door 4 tefachim, it can be placed there. So it doesn't have to be the first tefach, it could be the second or the third, as long as it doesn't move 4 tefachim over into the doorstep. And the last and final Tosfos is when we brought down the teaching of Rabbi Meir, that a person cannot carry from the Rosh Hashanah that he's in to a post which is also a Rosh Hashanah. Inside that Rosh Hashanah, it's a gzeira mishum tel b'Rosh Hashanah. It's a decree on account of a hill in Rosh Hashanah. A person shouldn't come to do the same thing, carry onto a hill or a post in the Rosh Hashanah, where then it's an Isser Minatera, because this hill or this post is a Rosh Hashanah. So over here we gave the reason for the decree, and Taisus has 2 points. Number one, Taisus explains that Rebbe Meir only says this in cases where a person may make a mistake by Rosh Hashanah. We gave the reason, which indicates only when that reason applies. However, if the reason doesn't apply, if there's no concern that a person will do the same thing in a Rosh Hashanah, it would be mutter according to Rebbe Meir. And Taisus gives an example of carrying from the ground floor of a house to the upper floor. It'll be mutter because a person will never come to carry from the Rosh Hashanah to an upper floor of a house. He clearly could recognize that it's a separate Rishus because it's surrounded by walls. And number two, Taisus explains that we don't rule like Rabbi Meir. Taisus points out that although we follow the decrees of Rabbi Meir, generally we follow the decrees, the Gzeris of Rabbi Meir, even when he's opposed by a majority. Over here we don't, and he brings a proof to it. So once again, we see how Taisus is referring to the Gemara. Number one, the Gemara says the teaching of Rabbi Meir. Taisus explains to us that it doesn't apply everywhere. And number two, Taisus points out to us that we do not follow this teaching of Rabbi Meir. And with that, we have an overview of the Gemara on Daf Chesam and Beis and Daf Tesam and Aleph, as well as the Taisus on it.